It was a bright morning, but in Nkechi's heart, the clouds had never been darker. The scent of fried plantains wafted from the neighbor's window, a cruel reminder that life went on, even when yours felt stuck. She stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the gelly on her head, hiding the tears in her eyes with powder and a practiced smile. For 10 years, she had worn that same smile, for her husband, for her children, for the world. She had learned how to laugh even when her heart cracked. But that morning, something deep inside her felt broken beyond repair. Nkechi married Obinna straight out of university. He was charming then, full of dreams, a man who knew how to make a woman feel seen. Their wedding was modest but filled with love, or so she believed. But slowly, love gave way to indifference. The Obinna she once knew became distant, distracted, and eventually, cruel. The verbal abuse started first. Subtle jabs at her cooking, her weight, the way she talked. Then came the late nights, unanswered calls, mysterious female names flashing on his phone. Still, she stayed. Because in Nigeria, society teaches women that marriage is an achievement. That leaving means failure. So she prayed. She fasted. She read every book on keeping a godly home. And when the bruises came, not just on her skin but on her spirit, she covered them with long sleeves and deeper silence. By their 7th year, the house had become a cold battlefield. Her son, Chinedu, only 9, learned to tiptoe around his father's anger. Her daughter, Ada, barely spoke at all anymore. Nkechi tried to keep the family together, to hold on to the idea of the man she married. But the last straw came the night she caught Obinna in their matrimonial bed with another woman, Moji, her church usher. He didn't apologize. He laughed. And as if that wasn't enough, he mocked her for being too emotional. For days after, she wandered the house like a ghost, her eyes hollow, her voice barely a whisper. Then, one rainy night, Nkechi left the house and didn't come back. They found her car near 3rd Mainland Bridge. Her body was never recovered. But this isn't where the story ends. It's where it begins. 2 weeks later, the funeral was held in the village. Friends and relatives traveled far and wide to pay their last respects. The white canopy was filled with mourners dressed in somber colors, but the tension in the air was thick. Whispers circled like vultures. And then it happened. Obinna walked in hand with Moji, the very woman Nkechi had found in their bed. Dressed in a tight-fitting black dress and sunglasses too large for her face, Moji smiled like she was walking into a wedding, not a widow's burial. Gasps erupted. Mothers covered their children's eyes. And from that moment, the entire tone of the funeral changed. Something was coming. And it would change everything. The crowd fell into a stunned silence as Obinna and Moji strolled in. Every eye turned to them. The village elder, Ponwosu, shook his head in disgust. Tufia. This generation has no shame, he muttered under his breath. Obinna, oblivious or perhaps intentionally provocative, strutted to the front row, not once letting go of Moji's hand. She even dared to sit in the widow's seat, the place reserved for the grieving husband. Her long, painted nails tapped rhythmically against the plastic armrest. Some of the older women in attendance whispered prayers under their breath, others held back tears of frustration. Nkechi had been loved by many. She was the one who helped widows in church, gave money to school children whose parents couldn't afford fees, and cooked for village meetings. Her kindness was legend. Her pain, however, was a secret until now. Auntie Ifeoma, Nkechi's elder cousin, stood up. She was a fiery woman who never shied from speaking her truth. "This is not how it should be," she said, her voice shaking with grief and rage. "Our daughter is lying in that coffin because she carried pain alone. And now the man who broke her is parading shame at her final rest." The silence cracked. Whispers turned to mutters. A few people clapped softly. Even the priest shifted uncomfortably. But Obina remained unbothered. He looked up and smirked. You people don't know the full story. Nkechi was not a saint. She had her own demons. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Chinedu, their 10-year-old son, sat quietly beside his younger sister. His small hands clenched tightly around the arms of his chair. He had heard his father shout such things before. Your mother is too dramatic, she wants to control me, she's the reason I'm unhappy. But that day, with her coffin before them, hearing those words aloud broke something in him. Suddenly, he stood. Everyone turned as the boy walked to the front, his head bowed. He looked at his father, then at the coffin. My mummy wasn't perfect, he began, his voice shaking. But she tried. Every day, she tried. She cooked for us, she helped us with school, she waited for you, Daddy, even when you were with other women. Tears streamed down his face. But she cried every night. I saw her. I heard her. And now, she's gone. A loud sob escaped from someone in the crowd. Ada clung to Auntie Ifeoma's waist, trembling. Obina looked uneasy now. Moji shifted uncomfortably beside him, her painted lips tight. You said she had demons, Chinedu said, turning to his father, but maybe you were the demon, Daddy. That line cut through the air like a blade. The priest quietly folded his notes. He knew there would be no sermon today. The funeral descended into quiet chaos. Some people got up and left in disgust. Others gathered around the children, shielding them from their father. In the middle of the crowd, Obina stood alone, even with Moji beside him. But the storm had only begun. Something was coming for Obina. And it wouldn't be human. That night, the village was restless. The sky rumbled with distant thunder though no storm had been forecasted. Dogs howled in unison, their cries piercing the darkness. The elders said such things only happened when the dead was angry or had unfinished business. Obina returned to the family house that night, still puffed up with pride, as if nothing had gone wrong. Moji followed, dragging her suitcase across the gravel path with a huff. Your village people are too dramatic, she said, slipping off her heels once inside. You'd think I killed the woman myself. Obina poured himself a glass of schnapps and chuckled. Let them talk. Nkechi is dead, and I'm free. We can start our life now. He didn't notice the oil lamp flicker unnaturally as he said those words. Or the sudden drop in temperature that made Moji shiver despite the heat. But that night, sleep did not come easy. At exactly 2:14 a.m., the crying began. Faint at first, like a woman sobbing from a distant room. Moji stirred in bed and nudged Obina. Did you hear that? Hear what? But then it grew louder. The unmistakable sound of a woman weeping. Painful, drawn-out sobs that echoed off the walls of the compound. Obina froze, every hair on his body standing. It's probably the wind, he muttered, but even he didn't believe it. The crying continued. Moji, visibly shaken now, wrapped herself in the bedsheet. This is not normal, Obina. We need to leave this place. Suddenly, the room grew ice cold. The oil lamp extinguished itself with a hiss. Then came the knock. Knock knock. Slow, deliberate. From the front door. Moji screamed. Obina grabbed a torchlight and tiptoed to the door. When he opened it, there was no one there. Just the whispering wind and the rustling of dry leaves. But then he looked down. There, at the doorstep, was a worn-out pair of black slippers. Nkechi's slippers. The same ones she always wore around the house. The ones she was buried in. He stumbled back, heart racing. It's a mistake. Someone is playing games. But as he turned back into the living room, the sight made his blood curdle. There, written across the mirror with dripping red liquid, were the words, "You buried my body, not my pain." Moji fainted on the spot. Obina staggered, heart pounding, his mind racing. He tried to wipe the words off the mirror, but they smeared like fresh blood. No matter how hard he scrubbed, the message remained. That night, neither of them slept. And from then on, every single night at 2:14 a.m., the crying returned, louder, closer. The neighbors began to talk. Children whispered stories about the crying woman in Obina's house. And when a chicken was found strangled at the compound gate with Nkechi's wedding ring clenched between its claws, people knew. Obina was a shadow of the man he once was. His once broad chest now looked sunken, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. Moji had packed her bags 3 days after the mirror incident, muttering prayers and vowing never to return. But the crying continued. Every single night. At exactly 2:14 a.m., Nkechi's sobs echoed through the house, sometimes from the walls, sometimes right beside his ear. Doors slammed on their own, and her slippers kept reappearing no matter how far he threw them. He tried pastors. He tried native doctors. He tried sleeping in hotels. Nothing worked. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw her. Not the Nkechi he married, but a pale version, her eyes sunken, her dress soaked as if pulled from water, her lips trembling as she asked just one question. Why wasn't I enough? The question pierced him deeper than any curse could. On the 7th night, after yet another failed prayer session, Obina sat outside, bottle in hand, eyes staring blankly at the moonlit sky. He hadn't eaten. The villagers now crossed the road to avoid him. Children whispered and pointed. He heard them call his home, the crying house. But that night, something changed. There was no crying at 2:14. There was only silence. And then, a whisper. Not Nkechi's voice, but Chinidu's. Daddy. Obina jolted upright. His son stood before him, barefoot, tears in his eyes. I don't want to hear her cry anymore. Obina blinked, confused. Chinidu. What are you doing here, at this time of night? She cries because she thinks we forgot her, the boy said, voice trembling. She needs peace. The boy walked past him and into the house. When Obina followed, the room was filled with the scent of jasmine, Nkechi's favorite perfume. The oil lamp flickered on by itself. On the center table lay something that hadn't been there before. A diary. Nkechi's. He opened it with trembling hands. Each page was filled with her pain, entries about how she tried to love, to forgive, to survive. There were notes about her sleepless nights, her fears for the children, and one final page that read, If I disappear, know that I only wanted peace. I hope, somehow, you find yours too. Tears streamed down Obina's face. He had destroyed a woman who only wanted to love him. The next morning, he gathered the villagers. With trembling lips, he confessed everything, his abuse, his affairs, his pride. He begged for forgiveness not from them, but from Nkechi's spirit. He knelt at her grave, now overgrown with weeds, and placed the diary on it. I failed you, he whispered. But I will raise our children better. I will make sure your pain wasn't in vain. That night, for the first time in weeks, the house was quiet. No crying. No knocking. Only silence. And in that silence, a lesson settled over the village like morning dew. Sometimes, the dead don't haunt us because they are angry. They haunt us because they loved us, and we forgot. Nkechi never appeared again. But Obina, forever changed, spent the rest of his life telling others. If your home feels like hell, don't wait for death to speak up.